What's up guys, Coach Sean here, and today I've got a very special treat for you today. We're doing the creme de la creme, the king of all steaks, the best in the world. We're cooking up some Kobe beef filet mignon. Now this is my first time cooking, heck, eating Wagyu beef, and I couldn't be more excited. And by excited, I mean scared out of my freaking mind. Now, let's back up a little bit and talk about how we got here. My good friend Justin, who was stationed in Japan for a few years serving our country, completely fell in love with Kobe beef when he was over there. And he's been wanting to have it again, but he's just been hesitant to cook it on his own. So a few months ago, I had the boys over for steak and whiskey night, and I believe we cooked steak au poivre, beautiful filet mignon, cooked in a peppercorn cream sauce, highly recommend it. But he was impressed with how well I cooked the steak and asked if he went out and bought some Wagyu beef, would I be comfortable cooking it? And I said yes. I was so humbled that somebody thought that highly of my steak cooking abilities. Then I immediately freaked out. What had I gotten myself into here? Cooking the most expensive steak in the world? Don't mess up. Anyways, at the last minute, I decided to throw up my cameras, but I'll level with you guys. I was so concerned with cooking a good steak. I didn't get the best video shots, but I still wanted to document my process and all the decisions I chose to make along the way to cook the best steak. And I always love hearing your guys' comments, your feedback, what would you have done differently? Now before we get started, I have to shout out New York butchers Debragga. This is where we got our steaks from, and while the steaks were amazing, their customer service was even better. We actually messed up and ordered our steaks for 1 week in the future. We called them up and said, hey, we kind of goofed, could you guys get our steaks here a week earlier? They had a butcher come in, cut up our steaks, overnight them. If that's not customer service, I don't know what is. So I'm happily gonna go back, and I truly hope you guys do too. Now, let's get into the cooking. As far as my methodology and what I chose to do to cook these steaks, I had two principles that I just didn't want to violate. First up, I wanted to do no harm. Second, I wanted to keep it simple stupid. I didn't want to go off adding crazy pan sauces or cooking it on a grill. I wanted to keep it very straightforward so that the beef could really shine. So the method I decided to go with is I decided to sous vide the steaks, and then I was going to sear them in a cast iron pan to get that nice crust on the outside. So unpackaging these bad boys, you can see that the marbling is like nothing you're gonna see in a grocery store. The feel was completely different as well. They were way softer than any steak I had ever touched before. The smell, it definitely had a stronger, more prominent beef smell. I was excited right from the start. So the first thing I did is I took some butcher twine and I wrapped it around the outside, and that's because anytime I'm sous videing or putting it in a vacuum sealer bag, it's gonna deform it a little bit. So by putting the string around the outside, it's gonna help the steak maintain its shape. Then I moved on to seasoning. I decided to only add salt at this point of the cooking. Something I've recently started doing is I don't add pepper until the steak is completely cooked. I find when black pepper hits a hot cast iron, it burns and it definitely throws off the flavor. That's why I choose to add my black pepper at the very end. So once all our sous vide bags are packaged up, I'm gonna drop them into my immersion circulator. Now sous vide is nothing more than water constantly circulating at a consistent temperature. I decided to cook my steaks at 129 degrees, so that's just shy of medium rare, and I'm expecting the final sear is gonna kick those up just a little bit, but we're gonna finish with that perfect temperature, medium rare. You can't go wrong. So after an hour and 15 minutes, I removed the steaks, I temped them just to double check. They were right where I wanted them to be, so I headed over to my cast iron and got ready to sear these boys. Here, I've got my cast iron pan over high heat with avocado oil. Right before I added the steaks to the pan, I looked at everyone in the room and told them if I have to choose between getting a good sear on these steaks and setting off the fire alarm, I will set off the fire alarm. Luckily, it didn't come to that, but hey, a man's gotta lay out his priorities. I had my timer going, steaks went in the pan, and I seared the first side for about 30 to 45 seconds. Then I flipped these bad boys over, I dropped the heat to low, and I added a crap ton of butter, and I just started basting. And this went on for a good minute. Then I started temping my steaks just to give me an idea of where I was. I was right at about 132, 133. This is great. I'm not expecting much carryover since we did sous vide them, so I decided to pull them and let them rest. Now I'll tell you what, if you've ever waited on a steak to rest before slicing it, Take that feeling times 10. That's what it feels like when you're staring at a giant plate of Wagyu beef. I grabbed my fanciest slicing knife, but I could have grabbed a butter knife. These steaks were so tender. Now this whole time, I'm internally freaking out, did I cook a good steak? And as soon as I saw that beautiful red inside, that medium rare color, oh, I knew we were in luck. We finished them with a little bit of that freshly ground black pepper, and then I topped them with some good flaky Mediterranean sea salt. As far as the taste, it was to die for. It was amazing, but a little bit weird, because I've never tasted anything like this before. The consistency, the texture was so soft. It's so different than any steak you buy in a store. I always wondered if the A5 Japanese Wagyu beef was worth it, and in one humble Midwestern boy's opinion, yes. So I hope you liked this episode of Coach Sean's Kitchen, and if you did, please like this video. Let me know how I did in the comments. Seriously, if you enjoy my content, the single best thing you can do is leave a comment below. Doesn't even have to be creative or witty. You can just say, I love steak. That'll work for me. I want to thank you for tuning in to this very special episode of Coach Sean's Kitchen, and as always, you can make anything homemade and healthy.